So, Regulation I is double restricted. And of course, everyone is now focused on what restricted pairing they're going to be using. I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I'm going to be giving Pokemon that can counter specific restricted pairings. Maybe you've got a team of 4 or 5 that's working pretty well, but you're really struggling with one archetype. The intention of these videos is going to be that this might be the perfect 6th mon for your team. They might not be very good on their own, but they might be the perfect 6th mon to solve your team. That's the intention with this. I'm going to start with Calyrex Shadow Rider and Zamazenta as a pairing, because I think that's probably going to be one of, if not the most common archetypes for restricted pairings. So I'm going to give Pokemon that are going to be countering those. Lots of people are going to be focusing on just the restricteds. I don't have the restricted guides on my channel. I think there's kind of no point at this point because everyone knows what the restricteds do. And one of my main niches was giving guides for all the other Pokemon. So here we are with a different style of giving a guide for all the Pokemon. Starting with Araquanid. I'm just going to go alphabetical order. This isn't necessarily this is the best counter. It's just going to be alphabetical order every time. Starting with Araquanid. To counter Shadow Rider, you got Wide Guard. That's going to be huge in this meta. There's only a few viable Pokemon that have Wide Guard. And obviously Zamazenta is one of them. That's going to be the most common, and you're going to be wanting to counter that as well. Araquanid resists both fighting and steel type attacks, which is huge. So you're a counter to Zamazenta in that regard, and then you can Y-Guard against the Shadow Riders. Even if you don't Y-Guard, you've got very respectable special defense as well. You should absolutely have Liquidation, Y-Guard, and Protect, and then this Infestation slot is just my recommended one. There's a couple of other moves that is entirely reasonable as well. To be a perfect... I say perfect, but basically perfect counter to Zamazenta. You can have Iron Defense, and then they really can't break you. Icy Wind as extra speed control just for your the rest of your team. If this is not on a Trick Room team, and it's just to be able to counter the Shadow Riders. And I also think the Sticky Web is worth considering, but probably not worth. I would overall value the trapping and the residual damage that Infestation is able to give. The EV spread is enough attack so that a Incineroar that is able to survive a Surging Strikes from an Urshifu is 2-shot by your -1 Liquidation. So that sounds quite niche, but no, that's going to come up a reasonable amount if you're using Araquanid. Especially if you don't have Clear Amulet, I would recommend Leftovers, because this is supposed to wall out the Pokemon. Clear Amulet would be perfectly fine. Mystic Water would be perfectly fine. I wouldn't have any other items apart from those, though. And then I've just dumped it into defense, because its special defense is already very good. Terra Steel works actually pretty well with Water Bubble as well, because you... I say resist fire, like, you know, same thing, half firepower against you, so even if you Terra Steel, you're going to be fine there. And you resist ground and fighting type attacks normally if you just stay as a water buck. So, yeah, Araquanid is just the first Pokemon that came to mind, and was the Pokemon that I saw, thought, hey, this is good against Shadow Rider and Zamazenta, and then had the idea for this, for these kind of guides. So, yeah, next one, Armarouge. May seem a bit strange to be a counter to Shadow Rider, but again, it's got Wide Guard, and it resists the Psychic type attacks. So if you are clicking Wide Guard with Armarouge, then suddenly the Shadow Rider can't really deal with you. And if you're in a position where you're not against the Shadow Rider and you can afford to click Trick Room, well then suddenly you're under speeding, and then Armor can do a huge amount of damage. I would have Expanding Force for sure if you have an Indeedee on the team, and I would probably recommend still having Expanding Force even if you don't, because I think that Indeedee will still be entirely common in this format. So just getting that extra spread damage and the boosts when they do have Indeedee, I think is worth sacrificing the extra 10 base power from Psychic. Psyshock is worth considering as well, so you can hit on the physical defense. Just in my practice running Armarouge across the regulations, I found that Life Orb is the best item, just in my opinion. I've missed too many KOs if I don't have Life Orb, and I get all the KOs if I do have Life Orb. There's plenty of other items that are very reasonable on Armarouge, but that is just my big recommendation. Terra Dark, so that you can Terra in front of the Shadow Rider. Obviously, you'll be weak to Body Press afterwards, but you'll be able to resist the Shadow Rider very nicely if the Zamazenta has already been dealt with. It stops things like Prankster Encore, so Whimsicott can't Encore you if you've just gone for Trick Room. You can just Terra, and then you just keep the Trick Room. Things like that as well. And you also wall Chi-Yu if you Terra Dark, because then you've got Flash Fire to keep yourself safe as well. You could consider Terra Fairy, so that you're better against Koraidon as well, because then you'd have the Flash Fire for the fire moves, and then the Fairy would resist the fighting type attacks as well. Basculegion should only be on a rain team. Like this is a caveat of have this with rain for sure, because again, you resist both of the stabs of Zamazenta, and you will outspeed and OHKO the Shadow Rider if you've got in the rain with the Wave Crash, Terra Water Life Orb, or if you've got a couple of KOs, Last Respects will also be able to deal with it. Obviously, if you're out of the rain, then suddenly this is going to lose to Shadow Rider, but if you are in the rain, which you should be if you're running Basculegion on your team, then this would be able to counter opposing Shadow Riders as well, just because it's faster. Tiny bit of defense, so you can live a Grassy Glide from Rillaboom, and then just max speed, max attack, basically otherwise. I would recommend Terra Water as the best Terra type. You could go for a defensive one, but the point of Basculegion is just to pick up KOs, and Terra Water will push that over the edge that you wouldn't have got otherwise. This is a Pokemon that is definitely still seeing usage. I'm saying these are niche Pokemon, but, you know, Ditto has been used a reasonable amount, but it is still a very good Shadow Rider and Zamazenta counter. The issue would be if you copy the Shadow Rider, then suddenly Zamazenta can White Guard against you. And then if you copy the Zamazenta, well then you can't really hit the Shadow Rider. So this is good at countering both individual Pokemon, if you manage to catch them. Maybe not so much as a pairing if they're both on the field, but if you dealt with one of them and then you catch the other one, then it's really good. Because if you catch Shadow Rider, then you most are going to be focused as Shadow Riders as well, I think, in this format. And Choice Scarf is entirely reasonable on Ditto as well. But if you got either Focus Sash or Ditto, you can either survive an Astral Barrage or outspeed and get your Astral Barrage first into them. And if you copy Zamazenta, then you get +2 defense, because you copy their +1 defense, and then your now Dauntless Shield activates, giving you another +1, giving you +2 overall. So you do end up beating opposing Zamazentas because you've got more defense. So Ditto is entirely reasonable against countering both of those. Just be careful about the positioning. Obviously, Ditto is all about positioning, so that you can be able to counter properly, because it can beat both Restricteds in a vacuum, but as a pairing it might be a little bit more tricky unless you've dealt with one of them. Again, Pelipper is not so much a niche Pokemon because, you know, it's got like second at Worlds and all that kind of thing. We know how this works. But again, this is supposed to be Pokemon that can be the perfect 6th Pokemon for your team. This does other things, like it stops Koraidon and Groudon with their abilities as well. But again, this is resisting both Body Press and Behemoth Bash / Heavy Slam. It's going to be Behemoth Bash now because we've got 2 Restricteds. And you can justifiably increase the bulk of the Pelipper so that you can take on Zamazenta a bit better. And again, it's got Wide Guard, so it's a Calyrex. Any Pokemon that's got Wide Guard counts as a Shadow Rider counter. You obviously have Weather Ball and Araquanid as your stabs. Protect or Helping Hand are the last 2 moves. I don't think I need to say too much about Pelipper, this is basically a reminder that this is a good Pokemon to counter Shadow Rider and Zamazenta. We basically know how Pelipper works at this point. And this one you probably haven't thought of as much as a Shadow Rider Zamazenta counter, but I would argue that this definitely is. Because again, you resist both of the stabs of the Zamazenta is a theme throughout this video so far. So Volcarona can take on quite nicely. It can Quiver Dance faster than the Shadow Rider, which is a big thing, because it's also boosting its special defense as you do that, so it can shrug off the Astral Barrages a lot nicer as well. Terra Dark will be able to shrug off the Shadow Rider for sure, and hopefully by the time that you've Quiver Dance / need to Terra Dark, you will be in a position where you can OHKO the Zamazenta by outspeeding and flamethrowing it. I would not recommend Heat Wave because Zamazenta has a Wide Guard. So if you're stuck in a position where it's like, well, I'm going to Fire Move and KO this Zamazenta and my only Fire Move is Heat Wave, well then I can't because they just Wide Guard. It's like the same thing with saying that Armarouge is counter to Calyrex. You can Wide Guard the Astral Barrages and then you can't be touched otherwise. It'll be the same situation where if you have Heat Wave on the Volcarona, then you still can't touch the Zamazenta because they are just Wide Guarding. Also, it can miss. I would recommend the 100% accuracy if you can help it. Fiery Dance is pretty reasonable on Volcarona. It should be either Flamethrower or Fiery Dance. But everyone knows how Volcarona works. I'm just giving you a set that, maybe you haven't thought about. Bug Buzz Throat Spray is a pseudo Fiery Dance that always works once. And that once should be enough. So yeah, Flamethrower and Bug Buzz are obviously both of your stabs, and you'll lose some coverage on some Pokemon. So like Fire, for example, you don't really hit, but wait a minute, the main Fire Pokemon is neutral against Bug Buzz. So, you know, it should still work out perfectly fine. I do like the Terra Dark as well for Prankster Encores from Whimsicott. I've already said about the Armarouge. I think that is entirely reasonable as well. The spread is enough to outspeed it was going to be just Shadow Rider, but then at that point, why don't you just outspeed... Shadow Rider +1, that is. But then why don't you just outspeed Modest Chiyu, because it's just a tiny bit extra. I made this spread a while ago, and I've forgotten what the defense does, but just trust. This is a good spread. So, yeah, this is a Pokemon that you probably wouldn't have thought of immediately as a Shadow Rider Zamazenta counter, but I would put forward the argument that it absolutely is, and can easily be a perfect 6th one. If you've got any other Pokemon that I've missed that you think would also counter Shadow Rider and Zamazenta, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Ooh, I'm a true YouTuber now, if I'm saying that. But yeah, if I missed anything, then do let me know.